has a plan for your life, a direction, an ideal way for you to go through this journey of life. He has a coordinated effort to make it good. Do you believe that? Anybody? God has a plan? How many would say here in the room, I believe that God has some kind of plan or idea or purpose for my life? Hands. Yeah, okay. That's a Christian thing to believe. We like to call it God's will for your life. The stuff that he wants to happen. It might be very specific. It might be general. A lot of us believe God has a will for our lives. Okay, so what about this? Who would say, if God has a plan or a will for my life, I would like to be right in the middle of it? Anybody else want to be in the middle of God's will? Come on, you got to work out your arm here. I got to see it. There, okay, some of us, all right? One more question. For those of you who said, I believe God has a will and I would like to be in the middle of it, how many would say, at some point in my life, I have been stressed about the potential of missing God's will? Or stressed that I have already missed it, or stressed that he might have it and I don't understand it? Keep your hand up, okay? Look around the room. Do you see how many hands are up? Okay, online you can't see it, but a bunch of hands, you can put it down, a bunch of hands. Isn't that odd? Isn't that odd? If God is sovereign, if God is all-knowing, and he has this will that's important, that it matters, if he has a list of a path for Tom's life that would be better than other paths, isn't it odd that so many of us would say, I'm really stressed out that I'm going to miss it, or that I did miss it? Like, shouldn't he make it easier? Shouldn't it be a little more obvious? Shouldn't he download it into our brains? Shouldn't he force us back onto it? Shouldn't Cheez-Its have no calories? So many questions that I have. If they taste so good, why? It's not right. I want to look at that today. I want to look at the potential for missing this plan that God has, the best version of David's life that's going on this. I want to look at that today. And I want to talk about why we miss that plan so often and why we stress about it too much. It's part of our series that we just kicked off called Old School. If this is your first week, no big deal. We're just really getting this thing off the ground. You can always go back and watch previous stuff on any of our social media channels. You can catch the podcast. But it's a simple idea. We focus on the New Testament a lot, because the New Testament is all about Jesus and the stuff that he's saying. But there's so much value when we look at the Old Testament of the Bible, because we learn that human nature never really changes, and God's nature never really changes. And there's so many things that are illustrated so well in these snippets of history. And so week by week, all through the summer, we're going to look at some of these pieces of history. We're going to talk about what that can teach us about ourselves and about how God interacts with us. So today, I want to show you a little snippet of history from around 1600 BC. We're not exactly sure, depends on who you ask, 1600 to 1800 BC. And we're gonna talk about a town you probably are familiar with. Even if you haven't read the Bible or you haven't been around church much, you've probably heard of Sodom and Gomorrah. If you don't know about those, you think of Gomorrah as the green girl from the Guardians of the Galaxy. Okay, not her. We're not talking about her today. Sodom and Gomorrah, and they're the relatively large cities in the ancient Near East that were completely obliterated. And there's archaeological evidence supporting what the Bible says, that these things in a moment were blown away, vaporized. The whole land was salted. It was like a wasteland for years. I want to go back there the night before the city is wiped off the map. God has seen how much wickedness was in Sodom and Gomorrah. So he tells Abraham, hey, I'm going to blow that city up. And Abraham's thinking, oh, wait, my nephew lives there. Well, you wouldn't wipe out the good people with the bad, would you, Lord? And the God's like, I don't think there are any good people in town, man. But if there are any, I will make sure they get out. So true to his word, God sends 2 angels to town, and we're going to pick it up in Genesis chapter 19. It's a long passage, so you can follow along in the Bible app. If you have the Bible app, just making sure, if you go to more on the button there and you look for events, you can find all of the notes already preloaded into your phone for today. It's really cool. You can take notes and you can save it for later and come back to it. So check that out. Okay, starting in verse 1, I'm reading from the New Living Translation here. The Bible says, that evening, 2 angels came to the entrance of the city of Sodom. Lot was sitting there. That's this one guy we're trying to rescue here. He's Abraham's nephew. Lot was sitting there, and when he saw them, he stood up to meet them. Then he welcomed them and bowed with his face to the ground. My lords, he said, come to my home to wash your feet and be my guests for the night. You may then get up early in the morning and be on your way again. Oh, no, they replied. We'll just spend the night out here in the city square. Lot realized that was a really bad idea, and you'll see why in a moment. Lot insisted. He said, you got to stay at my house. So verse 3, at last they went home with him. Lot prepared a feast for them, complete with fresh bread made without yeast, and they ate. But before they retired for the night, all the men of Sodom, young and old, came from all over the city and surrounded the house. They shouted to Lot, where are the men who came to spend the night with you? Bring them out to us so we may have sex with them. So Lot stepped outside to talk to them, shutting the door behind him. He realized, if you stay out in the city square, you're going to have a really bad night. You're going to be really sore when you set off on your journey tomorrow. These guys are a little messed up. Please, my brothers, he begged, don't do such a wicked thing. Look, I have 2 virgin daughters. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do with them as you wish. I think Father's Day is next week. I think this guy would make the list of bad dads. Like, what is wrong with you, man? But please leave these men alone, for they are my guests, and they're under my protection. Now, just real quick, this is not the main point of today. In that culture, in that time, hospitality was a really big deal. It was a really big cultural deal. Some of you guys are familiar with Southern hospitality. This is that on like all the steroids. And he's thinking, I have a responsibility to protect these men, and I know how the men in town are about newcomers. So he says, please don't do this. Verse 9, stand back, they shouted. This fellow came to town as an outsider. Now he's acting like our judge. We'll treat you far worse than the other men. And they lunged toward Lot to break down the door. But the 2 angels reached out, pulled Lot into the house, and bolted the door. Then they blinded all the men, young and old, who were at the door of the house. So they gave up trying to get inside. Barely escaped there. Meanwhile, the angels questioned Lot. Do you have any other relatives here in the city? They asked him, get them out of this place, your sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone else, for we are about to destroy the city completely. The outcry against this place is so great, it's reached the Lord, and he has sent us to destroy it. So Lot rushed out to tell his daughter's fiancés, quick, get out of the city. The Lord is about to destroy it. But the young men thought he was only joking, okay? All of that stuff makes sense until I get to verse 15. And then it gets weird if I'm Lot, okay? And that's where I want to focus in. Let's put that up on the screens here, okay? Verse 15, do we have that? Yeah, right there, okay. I can't read, apparently. At dawn, do you remember, when did these guys come to his house? It's like at evening time, it's dinner time. They hadn't even fallen asleep yet when all of the guys came banging on the door. At dawn? The next morning, he's still there. At dawn the next morning, when Lot is still there, the angels became insistent. Hurry, they said to Lot. Take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here and get out right now, or you will be swept away in the destruction of the city. Run for your lives and don't look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains or you'll be swept away. And Lot says, oh no, my Lord. I cannot go into the mountains. Disaster would catch up with me there, and I would soon die. I'm afraid to go, and I'm stuck. Has anyone ever seen, you're driving and you see the deer that actually like freezes in the headlights? You've ever experienced that? And he's just standing there. Or I've had this. I live in Sunset Hills, where all the way around the back where the lake is, there are like an insane amount of geese. Have you ever seen this? The geese are just strolling across the road, and this car comes up, and I'm honking, and they're just like, "What are you going to do about it, chump?" They're just walking, and I'm like, if I wouldn't have to clean you off of the grill of my car, I would just... Okay? Why are you not running? What are you doing? If I'm Lot, how could it be more clear? These guys that I thought were just guys perform a miracle. They save my life and they blind all of the guys in town. I clearly realized these are not regular men. These are guys that I should listen to. And they said, God is about to blow up the city, so run for your life. And he's like, I don't know. Maybe you'll just, maybe we'll leave in the morning. Okay? That run for your life, the city's about to get destroyed, does not sound, Rick, like a wait in the morning kind of deal to me. Okay? It doesn't sound like, well, I need to recharge my phone because I don't want it to, I don't have that fast 15 amp charge. No, you just get out. What's wrong with him? What's wrong with him is what's wrong with you and me. It's something that's common to human nature. And every week in this series, we're going to hopefully look for two things. What do we learn about human nature? And what do we learn about God's nature? Here's what we learn about human nature. Write this down in your notes. Humans are bad at following directions. We're really bad at it. If you don't believe me, just ask somebody about their experience with IKEA furniture. Okay? Some IKEA furniture is really good. Some of the bad reviews I've read are like, bro, did you look at the directions? They have them in 17 languages. I know English is one of them. Okay? We're bad at following directions. Some of you guys are very particular about how the laundry is done in your home. Any particular laundry people? Anybody ever give clear directions to the young person or to the male person living in your home? Lights, darks, don't mix them. Bleach goes on this, bleach does not go on that. How do we keep messing this up? Okay, the dishes stack this way and the spoons go this way. And if you put them this way, they don't get clean, right? We're just bad at following directions. We come by it naturally. And we struggle to follow directions, the same reason that Lot struggled to follow directions, the same reason that his sons-in-law did. I don't want to look at those for just a minute. So write this down in your notes, and you'll see this on the Bible app too. Sometimes, when you're talking about God's will now, okay, let me back up. This wasn't just angels telling Lot. God told Abraham, if they're good people in town, I'll make sure they get out. So he sent these angels. You have a job. Get this man out of the city so I can blow it up. Okay, this is God's will for Lot, which is explicitly spoken to him face to face by literal angels. Okay? But he missed it. Sometimes you miss God's will because you don't trust the messenger. Okay? Now, I think Lot trusted the messenger very well. Okay? But he goes to his sons-in-law. Now, experts debate this. Lot probably had several daughters. He probably had a few that were already grown who had moved out of the house. So he's going to their house and he's trying to tell these men, get my daughter and my grandkids, get your family, get out of here. And they didn't take him seriously. They're like, what? This is a practical joke, right? How sad, how tragic that they didn't believe him. So many times when we have trouble following God's will, it's because we don't trust the messenger who's delivering this stuff. A lot of us live in among friends who, okay, look, this is a Christian nation theoretically, but we got a lot of people who are really critical of the Bible. And so they'll say things like, well, don't you know that they rewrote this part back in the Middle Ages? It's not really, that wasn't what was in there. Or, the Bible was written in Greek and they translated it into English, so you can't really be sure that that means what it means. Or maybe you've seen a guy on the stage or a guy on the screen abuse the position of a pastor and the influence to bend it for a political gain or for financial gain or just to beat up on people because he has a personal axe to grind. Maybe you've listened to some prophets on YouTube that said, all the hostages are going to be set free tomorrow in Israel, and they're not set free. And you're like, well, I just can't trust this guy. Okay? There are a lot of times where we don't follow because I'm not sure that that's really what God means. Sometimes you miss it because you don't trust the messenger. Other times you miss it because change is hard. Sometimes we don't do what God wants us to do because we like doing things the way we're doing them. Change is hard. Change is hard for old people. Change is hard for young people. Just ask people every time they update TikTok. You could be a teenager and really not like change. They move the button. Okay? We don't like change. And Lot here, you may not realize this. Okay? This is kind of a subtle thing, but the Bible notates this. When the angel showed up to town, it said Lot was sitting at the city gate, at the entrance to the city. Okay? What that means was Lot was a respected leader in that town. He was sort of one of the aldermen of the town. Because back in that day, the leaders of the city would hang out at the city gate. If people had disputes or needed someone to mediate between them, or they needed to decide official city business, that's where they conducted business. So Lot has kind of a comfortable scenario going on here. He has daughters that have married men in town, right? He's like relationally connected. And back in that day, okay, this is a walled city. Back in that day, if you didn't live behind walls, bandits were likely to come and steal all of your stuff. Okay? He's living with some crazies and he knows it. But at least he's not going to get stabbed in the middle of the night and people run away with all of his stuff. He's got a good thing going on. And so what these guys are asking him to do is run off into the mountains and be a hillbilly. Like, I'm a city guy. I don't even know how to, right? Sometimes we don't do it because change is hard. Sometimes, write this down, sometimes you miss the path because the path is hard. I miss God's will not because I don't know. Okay, this has been me sometimes. Sometimes I don't miss God's will because I don't know what he wants me to do. Sometimes I miss it because I know exactly what he wants me to do. But dude, that is hard. Okay, Lot is at a point in life where he has grown children that have left the house. Run up the mountains is not so easy anymore. Okay, I am 40. Okay, even at 40, I'm like, some of these things I used to do are now a little more strenuous. Lots further along than I am and thousands of years ago. You expect me to run up into the mountains? What am I going to eat up there? I can't take my flocks up there. I can't take any of my stuff. Okay, it's not take the donkey and the wagon. It's leave all of your stuff behind and run. I don't want to leave all that behind. I can't go. What's going to happen to me if I go up there? And he's asking all of these questions. And we all raised the hand, not everybody, okay, but most of us. We raised our hand earlier and we said, I want to do what God's will is. I want to know what his will is and then I want to do it. And I do too. Here's what I've noticed, okay? Everybody is really excited about following God's will when you're trying to figure out if this girl is the one or not. Lord, should I buy the ring or not? That's going to set me back financially for years. So I want to make sure I get this right. Is this the one or not? We all want to know God's will whenever we get an offer from another company. I got the competing company. They're going to give me more money, but it's going to require more hours. I'm going to have to drive to Bloomington instead of in town. Is it worth it? Should I take this job offer? God, what is your will? Right? Young people. We all want to know God's will when it's time. Okay, what am I going to do when I graduate? Am I going to go into work? Am I going to go to a school? Am I going to go to which school am I going to go to? Can I afford this? Should I take out a loan? Should I not? God, I need your will, right? We all want God's will when it's the big stuff. We're all a little less interested in God's will whenever God's will for us is, hey, that thing that's been a rub between you and your spouse, you need to have an uncomfortable conversation and have conflict to work that out. I don't want God's will then. Right? When God's will is, hey, I need you to give the first cut of that paycheck back to me so the spiritual needs of your family and your community get met. Oh, that's not really that's the Old Testament God's will. That's not God's will for today. We're less interested in God's will when it's hard, when it's painful, when it's difficult. That's me. Both hands. But that's also God's will. You need to understand, 95% of God's will is already clearly written out in the Bible. It's how we're supposed to act. It's the type of people we're supposed to be. It's the type of values that the fruit of the Spirit grows in our lives. And this is my experience. Okay? Most of the time, when I have struggled with a decision, when I have struggled with, God, what is your will? God, what is your will? What is your will? Most of the time, the reality was I knew exactly what I was supposed to do. I just didn't want to do it. And most of those prayers, God, what is your will, is really me saying, God, can you give an alternate version of your will? Do I have to do that? I don't really want, I'm scared to do that. It's intimidating. It's hard. I don't know if I can. What's going to be up there at the top of the mountain? He didn't get the whole roadmap. He just got, run, dummy, just run. So he struggles. He struggles. And consider, put yourself in the spot of one of these two angels. If God sent you from heaven down to earth, he said, I have a special task. Get this one guy and his family out of town before we blow the place up. And you have been trying all night long, and this dummy is still standing in his living room. How are you feeling at that moment? Because I'll be honest, Jason, if that's me, if I'm one of those two angels, in that moment, I'm like, Lord, we tried, okay? I tried everything. I told him what you told me to say. The city's clearly bad. It needs to be blown up. He's not interested. Just beam me up, Scotty. Blow him up. We'll explain it to Abraham. That would be me. But that's not what they did. Okay, verse 16. Watch this. When Lot still hesitated, the angel seized his hand and the hands of his wife and 2 daughters, and rushed them to safety outside of the city, for the Lord was merciful. And I read that a while back, and I thought, wow. Even when he had heard everything, even when he had every chance to do it right, he was still not doing it, whether it was because he was intimidated or scared, whether it's because he didn't want to leave town, whether it's because I'm not leaving without my other daughter, I don't know. But he's not listening, and rather than just say, tough luck, buddy, enjoy getting nuked, they grab him by the hand and lead him out. They were not willing to leave him behind. And that's something valuable that we learn about God's character. That's how he handles things. That's how he approaches what we do. Write this down in your notes. Your response to God doesn't change his commitment to you. Your response to God's will does not change how committed he is to you and you following. And that's a good thing. Because, Alex, you would have given up on you a long time ago. I would have given up on Chris a long time ago. I would have moved right on. Let me find somebody who is better at listening than that guy. I will keep going until I find one that will pay attention to what I'm trying to say. But that's not what he did here. He made a commitment to Lot, and he said, even if Lot is not interested in his side of the deal, I'm going to honor what I said I would do. I told Abraham, this is my character. If they're good people in town, I would spare them. And that's exactly what he does. Jesus talked about God's character this way. Okay? Luke chapter 15, Jesus tells it in a parable about a shepherd. He said, if a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go to search for the one that's lost until he finds it? That's the way God handles stuff. I'm not satisfied with the 99 who are doing it right and the one knucklehead who wandered off. Okay? If Kelly falls off the path, he's not like, tough luck, Kelly, bye. Bye, Felicia. Is that can I still use that? Is that outdated? I don't know. Okay, use it. Yes. Relevant. Okay? He's not going to leave you behind. That's not how he handles stuff. He doesn't just leave people along the path. He says, stop. You all hang out here. I'm going to run back and get this one because I'm not willing to leave even one behind. Write this down in your notes. You need to understand this when it comes to God's will. God is more invested in you getting it right than you are. You want to do God's will? Do you know who wants that more than you? God. God really wants what's good for you. He wants what's best for you. Teenager, he wants you to be in the right profession. He wants you to be dating the right person. He wants you to go in the right school and not take on debt for something you're going to end up saying, why do I have $50,000 in debt for this useless degree when I'm fixing cars, right? He doesn't want that. He wants you to be in his will. He's not trying to hide it from you. And that's why you should care, as Ethan comes back up, that's why you should care about God's will, but you shouldn't stress about it. Let me share my experience in following God's will. You think, well, you're a pastor, right? You're right in the middle of God's will. I believe I'm doing what God asked me to do. Now, at 40, I'm about to turn 41. I knew, okay, young people, I knew when I was a teenager, I knew that God had called me to full-time ministry. I was positive. He spoke that to me. Multiple people who didn't know what God had said to me said, young man, I believe God's called you into ministry. Okay, it was obvious. I knew that this was the path that God had for me, but I didn't want that path. I was not interested at all. I had many conversations with God. I said, God, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get a degree. I'm going to get a PhD and make lots of money. I'll donate to the church. I'll volunteer at the church. I am not interested in ever working for a church. I grew up with a dad who worked for church. I didn't want it. I ran. Finally, I turned around in college. And so I got into ministry as a music pastor because I'm a good musician. I love doing music. And as a young music pastor, I remember people would ask me, so are you, do you want to like be a lead pastor someday? God's honest truth. I'd like unequivocally no. I'm not interested at all. I will do a lot of things. I will not do that. That is completely off my radar. And here I am. Okay? And you know what's amazing? God did not have a perfect will for Chris that I diverged from sometime in 2001. And it's like, well, you missed it. You just have to limp forward. That's not how it works. I've heard people before, and maybe you have too, I've heard people say, well, now, there's God's perfect will. And if you miss that, then there's God's permissive will. You ever heard those two terms? Okay. Let me just reality check you. Do you know how many people on the planet are living God's perfect will? Nobody. Nobody. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. For we all like sheep have gone astray, and God has placed the sins of us all on Jesus. Okay? None of us can get the perfect will right. And if you believe that God's will is this one narrow path that you missed sometime in the mid-90s, just reason with me. What happens if you legitimately believe God has a will out there somewhere and I missed it? What happens today? Do you keep trying? Or do you just be like, well, I don't know. I guess I just get a bag of Cheetos and see what's on TV. I missed his will. You stop. You stop trying. And God's will for you hasn't changed. Write this down in your notes. God's will is amazingly resilient. That's been my experience. What God wants from your life is so much more than going to a school or serving in a function. What God wants for your life is to be a good woman or a good man, to be an honorable worker, to be a good student, to be a kind grandparent. Okay, that's what he wants, and you can still do that. Okay? We'll fill in the rest of the blanks here. Let's put that next slide up. Okay? You have to understand, if you miss the path, God is not on the side of the path building hurdles for you. He's building on-ramps. Okay? God's will for your life is the GPS. When you blew right by the exit and they said, in a quarter of a mile, turn left, and you go right by that one. In half a mile, turn left, and you blow that one. Okay? No matter how many times you miss it, there's still an on-ramp back because God is more invested in your life and you living it for him than you are. And even when you have a season where you're unfaithful, God remains faithful to you. The angel took Lot by the hand and his family, and they rushed them out of the city, and they said, now that you're out of the city limits, run. Okay? They still had to move. They didn't fly them to the top of the mountain. There's always going to be an element where you have to move your feet, but God is so patient with us. He is so faithful. Even if we have seasons of being a goober, he doesn't just give up on us. Because every one of us has missed his will before. And it's not the will that's out there we can never reach again. It's for you today. So the last thing to write down is this: when you stray off the path, don't panic. Just get back on. Well, I missed God's will for me. No. Well, I don't know what God's will for me is in the future. Check this out. Look what's in the book and start there. Okay? Start by being the kind of person that he's asked you to be. And when the moment comes where you take the next turn, he'll say, hey, turn here. Because he's not interested in hiding his will from you. He wants you to do it. And we panic. Man, I get so much anxiety at times in my life about God's will. I have to relax and say, look, if I'm living my life trying to serve him, even if I miss the exit, I will catch the next on-ramp because he's not going to stop pestering me until I do. That's the other thing you should know. If God has called you to do something in life and you don't do it, he will keep telling you. And the only reason I turned around is because he just kept tapping me on the shoulder. Chris, I need you to do this. 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 Finally, he said, fine, I'll do it. There was so much peace in my life. I want to finish with this. So Jesus told this parable. Don't put it up on the screens yet. I'll tell you in a minute. Jesus told this parable. God's like the shepherd who has 99 sheep who are listening and one that wasn't listening. And he's the one who will always go back and chase down the one stray sheep and bring it back. And here's how Jesus finishes that parable. He says, when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. Now, most of you guys have probably not raised sheep, so you're not thinking about it this way. Frank, your family comes from a long line of working with sheep, okay? You've been around some sheep. Are sheep cuddly little fluffy Yorkie dog-sized animals? No. Sheep are big. Sheep are heavy, okay? The average adult sheep is between 100 and 350 pounds. You didn't know they were that big. Lamb chops for lunch, baby. Yeah. Sheep are big. So think about this. Because the people who heard this originally were shepherds. They would understand this. You don't pick up a 200-pound animal and carry it back to the flock because you're missing cuddle time. I don't want to carry. I'm joyfully carrying it on my shoulders. Don't miss this. There are only two reasons why you would carry a wayward sheep back to the flock. Either it got injured along the way when it ran off the path and it can't, or it's still not real good at following directions. And some of us here, and I put myself in here too, okay? Some of us have been in that spot where we wandered off the path and we can't just pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and get back on. Some of you hear this guy say, don't panic, just get back on the path. And you're like, dude, I can't. I messed up my family. I messed up my finances. I messed up my body. I can't do it. I'm broken. Some of you hear me say that and you're like, dude, I can't even treat my kids right for a week. I can't follow God's path for my life. And the thing about get back on path, you need to understand is that in that moment, you are not alone. God is not telling you, hey, figure it out. He's the shepherd who's saying, even if your leg is broken, I will carry you back on the path. Even if you are still ornery and you're like, man, day to day, I don't know. I want to be a good man, but sometimes I mess it up. I want to be a good mom, but sometimes if I'm being honest, I'm a terrible mom and I feel bad and I'm like, I can't do this, Lord. I can't follow you. He's like, I know. I will help you. I will take you back. You're not alone. And it is terrifying to think God has a perfect will, and if I miss it, my life's going to be a mess. If you hear the sound of my voice, and there's a desire in your heart to take the next step in your life in God's will, you haven't messed it up. It's not lost on you. Just get back on the path, because God is with you. Hey there, just wanted to take a minute to say thanks for watching. If a friend sent you this link, it's because they believe what we talked about today is going to make a positive impact in your life. And if it did, there's probably somebody that you care about who could benefit from it. So take a minute to share this video with somebody. Post it to your timeline or send them a direct link. And if you're able, take a minute to give using the link at the bottom of the description on this video. One last thing. Maybe you feel a tug at your soul and you're ready to take the next step in your spiritual life and form a relationship with God. We've got folks here who would love to talk with you about it. So just text prayer to the number on your screen and we'll follow up with you. It's also in the description on this video in case that helps. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.